a powerful, successful black woman, the CEO and sole owner of a luxury car dealership, was completely ignored and mistreated inside a business she built from scratch. But what the manager didn't know, he had just disrespected the boss herself. What happened next? Let's just say karma showed up fast. This is one of those moments that make you stop and reflect on the world we live in. A world where people can be so quick to judge others based on how they look, what they wear, or the color of their skin. But this story, it flips everything on its head and teaches a powerful lesson about respect, integrity, and leadership. It all started on an ordinary Wednesday in late spring, in the heart of Atlanta, a city known for hustle, heart, and black excellence. Vanessa Lewis, the CEO at the center of this story, had spent the last 10 years building her empire from the ground up. Victory Motors was more than just a high-end car dealership. It was a dream realized, a legacy built on hard work, sleepless nights, and a commitment to creating something that told people, you belong anywhere you want to be, no matter what the world has told you. Vanessa didn't inherit wealth or connections. She didn't come from corporate privilege. She trained as a mechanic when almost no women were in the trade. She learned about engines and customer service, marketing and finance, all on her own. First, she flipped auction cars, then small used car lots. Eventually, she opened her first luxury showroom at just 30 years old. 7 years later, she was running one of the top-rated luxury dealerships in Atlanta. And yet, on this particular day, none of that mattered. Because when Vanessa walked into her own dealership, dressed in her off-day casual clothes, without her usual heels or power suit, she became invisible. No fancy jewelry, no assistant hovering by her side, no obvious signs that screamed, I'm the boss. Just Vanessa, dressed comfortably in jeans, a hoodie and sneakers. She had a reason for showing up like this. Something had been weighing on her mind. Over the past few weeks, she'd received a few subtle complaints from customers. They'd talked about feeling overlooked, ignored, or talked down to by certain sales staff. Vanessa, a CEO who believed in leading by example, didn't want to rely purely on second-hand feedback. She wanted to see it for herself. So she arrived at Victory Motors unannounced, driving a perfectly clean, but very average Toyota Camry. She knew exactly which cars she wanted to look at. A new 2024 Mercedes G-Wagon, and a Porsche Panamera that had just been delivered. She walked through the glass double doors with confidence, but was met with immediate silence. 3 employees near the front looked up from their desks. One glanced at her, half-smiled, then looked back down at whatever he was working on. No one stood up. No one welcomed her. One even turned around without a word. Maybe they're just really busy, she thought at first. But there were only a few customers browsing the lot. The atmosphere was relaxed. There was zero pressure. And still, no one approached her or asked if they could help. Vanessa made her way toward the entrance of the showroom area, where she caught sight of a male floor manager, a white man in his late 40s named Mark. He'd been with the dealership for about a year and had a strong sales background. On paper, he looked great. Few customer complaints, charismatic in meetings, always brought energy. But Vanessa had never had a full one-on-one with him until now. Excuse me, Vanessa said with a friendly tone. Can I get some information on the G-Wagon out front? Mark looked her up and down, very clearly. His face tightened slightly, almost like he was trying not to laugh. Then he said something that sat deep in Vanessa's chest like ice. Ma'am, these cars are for serious buyers only. That's a 6-figure vehicle. If you're looking for used or economy models, there's a lot across the street that might be more in your range. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief, unsure if she'd heard correctly. I'd still like to ask a few questions, she responded calmly. Let's not waste each other's time, Mark said, even chuckling. You can take pictures if you want, but we like to keep our inventory for interested clients. And just like that, he turned his back and walked away. His words didn't just dismiss her. They cut. And it wasn't about the car. Vanessa could buy 20 G-Wagons if she wanted. This was about something much deeper. That stale, sour feeling of being underestimated yet again. Assumptions made purely based on her skin, her clothes, her presence. But this time, she had all the power in the world to do something about it. Vanessa didn't say another word. She didn't yell. She didn't cause a scene. She walked quietly back to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and called her assistant on speakerphone. Get everyone in the main conference room 10 minutes. I'm on my way back in. And make sure Mark is there. By the time she circled around and parked in her personal reserved spot, the staff, about 12 team members, including sales, support, and operations, were all in the room waiting, whispering among themselves. Mark looked up when she walked in. His expression shifted immediately. All color drained from his face. Vanessa walked to the front of the room and stood tall. Good afternoon, everyone, she said calmly, but with an unmistakable authority in her tone. Before we begin, I want to address something very important that just happened in our showroom. Something I never thought I'd witness inside a business I built with my own 2 hands. Gasps rippled. Heads turned toward Mark. I walked through those doors today as a customer. Dressed differently, no title, no assistant, just me. And what I experienced was passive, dismissive, and outright discriminatory treatment. She locked eyes with Mark. Mr. Mark Hastings, would you like to explain what gave you the right to judge a customer based on what they looked like? Mark stammered, trying to compose himself. I had no idea it was you. And that's the problem right there, Vanessa interrupted firmly. You should never need to know who someone is to treat them with decency. What if I'd been a VIP customer? A celebrity? Or just someone who saved for years to buy the car of their dreams? Would they deserve your disrespect too? The room was silent. Uncomfortable. Eye-opening. I have worked too hard, Vanessa continued, to create a space that's supposed to be about empowerment and inclusion, only to see it poisoned by small-minded thinking. She picked up a prepared letter from the table beside her. I no longer believe your values align with this company or its future. Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. Mark sat stunned as HR escorted him from the room. The rest of the team was visibly shaken, but something else began to happen. They nodded. They supported the decision. Many even spoke up afterward, thanking Vanessa for her leadership and for not letting the issue slide under the rug. In the following weeks, Vanessa used the experience to launch a complete overhaul of the customer service training at Victory Motors. More than that, she developed a program called First Impressions Matter, which focused on unconscious bias, empathy, and inclusive service. She held open meetings with staff and even brought in guest speakers to talk about race, gender, and economic profiling. The goal? To uproot the toxic beliefs that had quietly crept into her business, and make sure this kind of situation would never happen again. Her story spread like wildfire online once news hit social media. Customers came forward with stories of their own, some praising the transparency, others sharing similar experiences elsewhere. What Vanessa had done resonated not just because she was powerful, but because she had remained human. She handled it with grace, strength, and swift action. And today, Victory Motors is more successful than ever. Not just in sales but in reputation. People know when they walk into Vanessa's dealership, they're going to be treated like they matter, no matter what product they buy, how they look, or where they come from. Because at the end of the day, Vanessa Lewis reminded the world of a truth we often forget. Respect should never be earned by appearances. It should be given because we all deserve it. And if this story made you stop and think, share it. Someone out there may need this reminder today. Never judge a book by its cover, because that customer in sneakers might just be your boss. Or worse, your last sale. Meet Vanessa Lewis, a fierce, driven, and incredibly inspiring entrepreneur, whose name was slowly becoming a quiet legend in the streets of Atlanta. At only 37 years old, she was living proof that determination, vision, and courage could break through any glass ceiling. From humble beginnings to big dreams, Vanessa had walked a long, hard road to reach where she was now. Not just the CEO, but the sole owner of one of the most respected luxury car dealerships in Georgia, Victory Motors. Her remarkable journey started in a dusty, cramped garage on the southwest side of Atlanta. She hadn't come from money. In fact, Vanessa knew what it felt like to hand-wash and detail cars just to make rent. She was the kind of woman who had learned cars inside and out because no one expected a black woman to know spark plugs from suspension systems. And that's exactly why she learned everything, better than anyone else. While others were trying to climb corporate ladders, Vanessa was building ladders of her own, one rung at a time. She started off buying used, damaged cars from auctions, fixing them in her mother's backyard, then reselling them. From there, she moved to a tiny rented garage that became her first office. Fast forward 10 years and now she owned a spacious, glass-walled showroom that sparkled with some of the most luxurious vehicles you could imagine: Mercedes-Benz, Audis, Teslas, Porsches, each one representing not just wealth but aspiration. But Vanessa remained grounded. She never let herself get lost in the world of luxury and status. She rarely wore designer clothes, didn't travel with a personal assistant, and often chose comfortable sneakers over heels. Her staff respected her, but most of them never saw the grind that built the business. Many of the newer employees only knew her as the woman who appeared during monthly meetings and on official corporate documents. And that's why, on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, Vanessa decided to do something bold. She wanted to go undercover inside her own business. Not with fake glasses or wigs or dramatic disguises. No, that wasn't her style. She just changed her clothes. On that Wednesday, she left her Range Rover parked in her personal garage at home, and instead borrowed an older, clean but very average 2010 Toyota Camry from her cousin. No makeup. No accessories. Just jeans, a neutral hoodie, and her favorite running shoes. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She wanted to experience her dealership like a regular customer. No CEO badge. No fanfare. Just a curious woman looking at luxury cars. Vanessa wasn't doing this for fun. She had a purpose. Over the past few months, a few rare, but troubling emails had made their way to her attention from customers. Each one had a similar theme. They felt ignored, undervalued, or even judged based on how they looked when shopping at Victory Motors. One woman wrote that despite expressing serious interest in buying a luxury Audi SUV, she was passed from one disinterested rep to another. Another gentleman claimed he was looked at like a credit risk before he even said a word. Vanessa took customer service seriously. It was one of her non-negotiables. From the beginning, her dealership was meant to be more than just a place to sell luxury cars. It was meant to be a safe, welcoming space, especially for people of color, women, young first-time buyers, and anyone who didn't look like they belonged. Her business wasn't just business, it was a movement. So when she got those complaints, she listened. But instead of sending a secret shopper, she became one. She pulled up to her own dealership shortly after lunch. She gave herself a moment in the car, checked her reflection in the mirror, and let out a breath. This was Victory Motors. Her baby. Every tile in that showroom had been approved by her. Every leather lounge chair in the lobby, every model on the floor, she chose it. The building still had her fingerprints on it, in every sense. She stepped out of the car and strolled in. The entrance bell chimed. The large glass doors glinted with the sunlight as she walked inside. And yet, no one really noticed her. That was the first red flag. Two sales associates were leaning near the reception desk, laughing about something on their phones. A receptionist looked up, gave her a quick glance, then continued doing paperwork. There was no welcome smile. No "Hi, how can I help you today?" Vanessa paused for a second by the coffee station, thinking maybe she just caught them at a busy point. Then she entered the center of the showroom, where shiny luxury vehicles glittered under polished lights. A few customers were chatting with sales reps at the far end, but otherwise it was calm. She approached a black 2024 G-Wagon, one she had personally ordered for the lot just 2 weeks ago, and admired the sleek paint, the massive wheels, and the pearl-infused detailing. Still, no one came up to her. So she walked towards the main reception again and asked politely, "Hi there. I was wondering if someone could speak to me about the G-Wagon outside?" A male voice behind her responded before she even finished the sentence. "You sure you're in the right place?" the man asked with a condescending chuckle. "This isn't really a budget lot." She turned to face him. It was Mark, a floor manager with good numbers and great confidence. He was tall, mid-40s, always dressed sharply. On paper, he was everything a dealership could want. But the way he looked at her was like she had walked into the wrong party. "I'm actually quite sure I'm in the right place," she said back with a calm smile. "Well," Mark continued, "unless you're just browsing for future dreams, we usually reserve test drives for serious pre-approved buyers. Especially for something like the G-Wagon. That car's over 150 grand. Vanessa held her ground. "How do you define a serious buyer?" "People who are serious know what they're looking for." he replied casually. They come in prepared. You just don't look. I mean, most people buying high-end cars don't come in like that. Pause hung in the air. Vanessa could actually feel something twist in her stomach. He had said it without saying it. He looked at her hoodie, at her shoes, and made a full judgment. To him, she didn't belong. She nodded slowly. Got it. Thank you. Then she did something no one expected. She walked out. Quietly. She got back in the Camry, drove around the block, and parked in her private space behind the dealership. Then she changed into her usual business blazer, fixed her hair in the visor mirror, and walked back in. This time everyone noticed. Reception quickly greeted her. Staff did double takes. Mark, who didn't recognize her from earlier or couldn't believe it, suddenly looked like he'd seen a ghost. She called a company-wide team meeting within 15 minutes. And then she spoke. As some of you now realize, she began in a commanding tone that echoed through the showroom floor. I was here earlier today. Not as your boss. As a customer. Whispers stopped. Eyes widened. You could hear a pin drop. Today I experienced something I never thought I would in this building. A reminder that even in 2025, assumptions are still stronger than facts. Judgments are louder than questions. Then she looked directly at Mark, and everyone knew. And from that point on, everything changed. But that's a story for another time. Because what happened in those few moments wasn't just about a bad customer experience. It was about the danger of forgetting your values. It was about the silent power of bias. And it was about a woman with more strength than most people could imagine, choosing to lead even in the face of complete disrespect. And that woman was Vanessa Lewis. And trust me, the world hasn't heard the last of her. As Vanessa walked up to the reception desk, something immediately felt off. There were polite nods, sure. A glance here, a faint smile there. But despite the staff making eye contact with her, no one actually acknowledged her presence beyond the most superficial gestures. They didn't offer help, didn't ask her what brought her in, and certainly didn't give her the kind of attention they were known for when high-profile customers arrived. And Vanessa knew exactly how that attention usually looked. This was her dealership, after all. Her name was on the legal documents. Her money had paid for every tile in the lobby, every leather armchair in the lounge, every car in the showroom. She had built Victory Motors from the ground up, turning it into one of the most respected luxury car dealerships in all of Atlanta. And now, because she showed up undercover, wearing jeans, a hoodie, sneakers, and no flashy jewelry, she wasn't even being treated like a customer worth their time. She stood by the reception desk for a moment, waiting to see if one of the sales associates would step forward. A tall man glanced at her once, didn't smile, and went back to typing on his tablet. Another mumbled something about checking on something in the back, and disappeared entirely. After standing for nearly 2 full minutes, Vanessa cleared her throat politely and said, "Hi. I'd like to speak with someone about the new SUV I saw out front." Her voice was calm, friendly, and polite. But apparently that wasn't enough. That's when Mark entered the scene. Mark Hastings, the floor manager, had joined the dealership a little over a year ago. On paper, he was impressive. Charming personality, 10 years in the industry, and strong closing rates. He had done well enough that Vanessa had kept him around, though she'd never interacted with him in any meaningful way. Until now. He strolled toward the front of the showroom with a confident stride. A man who felt completely at home in this space. He looked professional, dressed in a dark blazer over a form-fitting dress shirt, the kind of look that screams, successful sales executive. But when he laid eyes on Vanessa, something shifted in his gaze. His walk slowed. His eyebrows slightly arched. Mark's face shifted from neutral interest to mild annoyance the second he looked Vanessa up and down. She noticed. Oh, she definitely noticed. "We don't have budget-friendly cars here," Mark said casually, his voice almost dismissive. There was no warm welcome. No introduction. No handshake. Just cold words wrapped in condescension. "You might want to check the lots down the road," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the window. Vanessa blinked, stunned. She stood perfectly still for a moment, processing what had just been said. He had taken one look at her, her skin tone, her hoodie, her sneakers, and assumed she wasn't worth a high-end sales pitch. No questions, no context. Just judgment. And it wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. No curiosity, no openness, no sense of customer engagement. He had already made up his mind about her, and didn't care to be corrected. Vanessa's instincts kicked in like they always had during boardroom negotiations and business deals. She didn't let herself lash out or lose composure. She had been underestimated before, many times in fact. But rarely had it happened under her own roof. She replied smoothly, with a coolness that came from experience. Actually, I wanted to ask about the AMG G-Wagon I saw parked outside. It was a car she already owned, ironically. A 2024 Mercedes G63, matte black finish, fully loaded. She had bought one for herself as a milestone reward after the dealership hit triple its projected earnings that year. She knew every number on that vehicle's spec sheet, but she played her role, pretending to be a curious customer, just like anyone else. Mark let out a short chuckle. Not the amused kind, the mocking kind. Unless you're just here to take pictures for social media, he said, pausing so his words would hit harder. Let's not waste each other's time. That was strike two. Vanessa felt a rush of emotion rising in her chest. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something colder. A powerful stillness that came from being so disrespected that your body has to pause to really feel it. She tilted her head slightly, like she hadn't heard him the first time. But before she could respond, Mark walked away. Just like that. He turned his back and left her standing there, in full view of the showroom floor, in front of two other employees, a silent receptionist, and a customer nearby. No one said a word. The silence was loud. Vanessa stood frozen for a moment. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because she was trying to decide what part of her wanted to respond. The CEO, the black woman, the professional, or the young girl who once rebuilt ruined engines just to be taken seriously. But as much as it stung, it didn't surprise her. Because this was the kind of treatment too many women, especially women of color, received across high-end industries every single day. Whether they walked into luxury boutiques, private banks, or car dealerships, assumptions always walked into the room first. But Mark had chosen the wrong person on the wrong day. Vanessa took a deep breath. She looked around subtly. Then, without a word, she turned and left just as calmly as she had come in. Except she wasn't going far. Out in the parking lot, her phone buzzed in her back pocket. It was Tanya, her executive assistant and longtime friend. Vanessa answered the call, her voice still calm. I need you to do something for me. Call an all-staff meeting. I'll be back inside in 5 minutes. Everything okay? Tanya asked, picking up on her tone. I'll explain inside, Vanessa replied. Vanessa got into the Camry, the borrowed car she had chosen specifically for this undercover checkpoint, and drove around to the private parking area near the rear entrance, where only a few key executives parked. She opened her duffel bag and changed quickly into the business blazer she had folded and brought just in case. Her hoodie and jeans were swapped for slacks and heels. She fixed her hair quickly in the mirror, reapplied some lipstick, and took one good look at herself. Now she looked like the CEO. The same woman who was always featured in Forbes' 30 Under 40 lists, and who delivered motivational keynote speeches about Black excellence and entrepreneurship. She walked toward the dealership, this time entering through the executive hallway. Inside, word of the urgent meeting had already started to spread. Vanessa walked into the conference room, where the entire staff had gathered. There was murmuring curiosity. People looked around, wondering what this was all about. Mark stood near the back, confusion still on his face. Then Vanessa walked to the front of the room. The room went silent. Her presence wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. She didn't raise her voice, and yet every single person leaned forward slightly in their seat. Thank you all for coming, Vanessa began, her tone cool, steady, commanding. Before we get into routine reports, I'd like to share something with you all. Something important. Something personal. There was a tension in the air now. Subtle but unmistakable. I was in this dealership earlier today, she continued. But not as your CEO. I walked in from the front door like any customer would. No appointment. No tailored suit. No valet service. Just jeans. Sneakers. A hoodie. Silence. Eyes widened. I stood at the reception desk for more than 2 minutes. I asked to speak to a rep about a G-Wagon. And I was dismissed by someone who works for me. She didn't need to say any names. But everyone turned toward Mark, even him. I was told we don't have budget-friendly cars here. I was advised to go somewhere else. I was spoken to like I didn't belong. And before I even got the chance to explain who I was walked away from. As if I were invisible. The room could have heard a pin drop. Vanessa's eyes scanned the room. Calm. Disappointed. Powerful. I built this business to be different. To be better. To make people feel seen, heard, and respected. And if customers, especially women, people of color, or anyone who doesn't look the part, can't walk into our dealership and feel like they matter, then we've failed at more than just sales. We've failed at humanity. Then she turned to Mark. You, Mark, failed in a way we cannot overlook. That type of behavior doesn't align with our vision, or with basic human decency. With precise but unwavering delivery, she said the words he never saw coming. Your employment with Victory Motors is terminated. Effective immediately. Please collect your things. You're dismissed. No yelling. No drama. Just truth. Vanessa turned back to the room. Let this be a reminder that respect isn't optional. It's the foundation of who we are. And at that moment, every single person in that room realized two things. Number one, you never know who you're talking to. And number two, you should always treat people like they own the place because sometimes they actually do. Vanessa stepped outside the front doors of her dealership with a heart full of resolve. She didn't storm out. She didn't slam the door. She didn't raise her voice or call out Mark in front of the lingering customers and staff on the showroom floor. That wasn't her style. She had worked too hard, too long, and carried herself with too much grace to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her shaken. But make no mistake, she had seen enough. Leaning against the hood of the very ordinary Toyota Camry she had pulled up in earlier, Vanessa pulled out her phone. Her hands didn't shake, nor did her voice falter. She dialed the number of her operations lead, Tanya, a woman who had stood beside her since her earliest days in business. As soon as Tanya picked up, Vanessa said, I need you to pull everyone into the conference room within 10 minutes. No questions. Staff, sales team, management, everyone. Especially Mark. Tell them I've got something urgent to address. The tone in her voice told Tanya that this wasn't just a routine check-in. She didn't even ask for details. Understood. I'll handle it, Tanya said quickly. Should I? Just trust me, Vanessa interrupted. Already walking toward the back of the building, she re-entered through the executive entrance reserved for upper management. Along that quiet hallway framed behind glass were photos of major milestones, the opening of Victory Motors, Vanessa accepting an entrepreneurship award, smiling customers picking up keys to their dream cars. It was a timeline of her journey, her blood, sweat, and tears captured one moment at a time. And yet, just 15 minutes ago, she had been treated like an outsider in the very place those photos were framed on the wall. She walked into her office, placed her simple purse down, and stared at herself in the reflection of the window. It was hard not to reflect on how far she had come. From turning wrenches in her early 20s, even though people laughed at the image of a woman in grease-stained overalls, to becoming one of the few black women in the country to own a successful luxury car dealership. She had put in the work, educated herself on engines, branding, management, finance, and most importantly, the human side of business. But now, a man she employed, trusted to lead the floor, had dismissed her outright as if she didn't belong. And for what? Because she wore a hoodie instead of a blazer? Because she was alone instead of accompanied by an aide? Because he didn't believe that someone who looked like her was a serious buyer? She took a deep breath, matured and centered by every unfair moment that had brought her to this one. Walkouts, stares, underestimations, she had dealt with them all before. But today was different. Because the insult hadn't come from a competitor. It hadn't come from a stranger in the outside world. It had come from inside her own house. Her business. Her people. And now they were going to hear her voice, unfiltered. When Vanessa finally stepped into the conference room, the chatter that had built up inside fell almost instantly silent. All eyes turned. The sight of her in her usual sharp blazer, confidently walking in with her head high and purpose in her stride, flipped the energy in the room like a switch. Some staff gasped. Others sat perfectly still in disbelief, their eyes darting toward Mark, the floor manager who stood near the back with uncertainty creeping across his previously confident expression. He had not yet put the pieces together. Not fully. Vanessa walked to the front of the room, placed her phone face down on the glass conference table, and looked out at her staff. She waited. Let the silence stretch just long enough to thicken the air. Then she spoke. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice smooth but commanding, every bit the leader who had lifted this business off the ground. "In case you're wondering why I called this meeting so suddenly, I'll be clear. Yes, I'm the woman who walked into this dealership earlier. The one in jeans and a hoodie. The one no one bothered to greet. The one some of you barely looked in the eye. And yes," she paused for resonance, "I'm also your CEO." It was like the air had been vacuumed out of the entire room. Wide eyes. A collective inhale. She locked eyes with Mark. His jaw dropped slightly as realization dawned like cold water poured over his head. He took half a step forward, then stopped, processing the weight of what had just been revealed. "You all know me as Vanessa Lewis," she continued. "But today, some of you saw a stranger. A woman you didn't recognize, dressed differently without announcement. And instead of welcoming her the way we were trained, the way we built this company to do, she was ignored, condescended to, and walked out on." By now, the entire team was frozen in place. Many of them suspected an internal test had occurred. Others were shocked beyond words. And right there in the back was Mark, his gaze darting between his shoes and the table, panic creeping in behind his eyes. Vanessa turned to him directly now, her voice still steady, but colder. "Mark, would you like to explain to everyone why a potential customer was turned away at the door?" Mark swallowed hard. His voice was weaker now, but he attempted a defense. I didn't realize it was you at the time. I was just being protective of the dealership's image and trying to prioritize genuine buyers who were." Vanessa held up her hand. He stopped. "We prioritize respect here," she said, louder now, clearer. "For every customer. Every person who walks through our doors. No assumptions. No profiling. No treating anyone like they're less. Not because of what they wear. Not because of what they drive. Not because of the color of their skin, their gender, or their tone of voice." The room remained silent, hanging on to every syllable. "You failed at that today. And honestly, I don't even know how many potential clients have walked away because of that mentality." Mark opened his mouth again, likely hunting for an apology. But Vanessa wasn't finished. "I built this company to be different," she said, voice tight with restrained passion. "I built it after experiencing exactly those kinds of dismissals over and over again. And I made damn sure my business would be one of the few places where people couldn't be judged at the door." She inhaled, looked Mark straight in his eyes, and said with calm finality, "You're fired. Effective immediately." A long silence followed those words. No one moved. It wasn't just the shock of a firing. It was the wake-up call. One that had been earned through arrogance, through assumptions, through a complete disregard for the values this company was built upon. Vanessa turned her gaze back to the rest of the staff. "You are all on this team because I believed in your ability to represent something greater than just sales numbers. This isn't just about cars. This is about people. And if we forget that, then we've already lost." She let those words sit for a second. "You want to protect the image of this dealership?" she added. "Start by protecting the dignity of every person who walks inside it." She nodded toward the HR coordinator, who quickly made notes to process Mark's dismissal. As he left the room quietly, head lowered, Vanessa felt something shift in the space. It wasn't like the moment a storm breaks. It was like the sky clearing after it passes. Relief. Understanding. Realignment. She gave the room a final thought. If a CEO can be misjudged in her own business, how many others, black, brown, young, female, disabled, have walked into this space and left feeling disrespected? It stops today. People nodded slowly. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked inspired. But all of them looked reflective. And in that moment, Vanessa knew something else. She hadn't just fired a manager that day. She had reclaimed the very soul of her business. Not out of anger. Not out of ego. But because she refused to let ignorance take the wheel in her house. And that's how standards are reset. That's how cultures are rebuilt. Not with loud declarations, but with quiet strength that speaks truth when it matters most. And in Victory Motors, that truth just echoed loud enough for the entire industry to hear. The room was still. For a long moment no one spoke. Mark had just been terminated on the spot by Vanessa Lewis, the CEO of Victory Motors, after disrespecting her when she walked into her own dealership undercover. Everyone in the room had witnessed it. A moment so raw and unexpected that it didn't quite feel real. But it was. The boss had spoken, and there was no mistaking the seriousness behind her words. First it was shock. Silent faces. Shifting glances. Avoided eye contact. But then one by one, heads began to quietly nod. And slowly the realization began to dawn. This wasn't just about Mark. This was about the culture they had allowed to grow. About the unconscious habits that had slipped in. About the unspoken assumptions that guided people's behavior. Assumptions based on appearance, background, attitude, or perceived status. Vanessa hadn't just walked into that showroom to play a trick on them, or to catch someone doing something wrong. She had walked in as a mirror, to reflect back what some of them had started to overlook. And now they saw clearly. After Mark left the room with HR, Vanessa didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she stood quietly for a few moments before inviting everyone back into the conference room for one more conversation. One that, this time, wouldn't be about profit goals or quarterly performance. "I want to talk about something different today," she began, after the team had returned to their seats. "I want to talk about the kind of business we're building, and who we are when no one's watching." She walked slowly to the center of the room, the hum of the dealership outside still faint in the background. She didn't refer to a script. She didn't read from her notes. "I started this company because I wanted to prove something. Not just to the world but to people like me. Black women. People who've been told they didn't belong in certain spaces. People who've walked into showrooms and boardrooms and been looked over, sized up, passed by." Several heads lowered. Some team members looked visibly uneasy. But Vanessa wasn't trying to make them small. She was trying to wake them up. "I've been that person in jeans and a hoodie with $100,000 in the bank, treated like they can't afford a sandwich." A few quiet chuckles in the room. Not mocking, understanding. Empathy. "There's this dangerous idea out there," she continued, "that only people who look the part deserve our full attention. But in this business, in this house, we don't just serve the loudest, richest, flashiest. We serve people. Period." She paused, letting the weight of that settle. Vanessa took a deep breath, then went on. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm not here to turn this into some public punishment. I'm here because this was a wake-up call. And not just for one person." She looked around the room. "I never expected to be treated better than anyone else here. I just wanted to be treated like somebody." Her words struck deeply. The atmosphere in the room changed again. From guilt and shock to reflection and shared responsibility. After the meeting, word of what happened spread like wildfire, but not through idle gossip. Through awe, respect, even admiration. Staff members began whispering to one another. Not about scandal, but about the message behind the incident. About how bold and real Vanessa had been. How her actions hadn't just resolved a moment. They called for transformation. That night, Vanessa sat in her home office, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. For a while, she didn't know whether to share the story publicly. Part of her didn't want to bring any extra drama into the dealership. It wasn't her goal to shame former employees, or become the center of a viral trend. But another part of her, one that had spent years silenced, overlooked and doubted, knew how powerful the moment had been. Not just for her. For every Black woman who had ever walked into a business and been treated like she didn't belong. So she opened her blog, one she rarely updated anymore, and began to write. "Today I was treated like a stranger in my own company. I showed up as a Black woman in a hoodie and jeans, and found myself minimized, judged, and walked away from by someone who works for me. I didn't write this to call someone out, but to call something out. The urge to judge people before you know their story. The tendency to measure someone's worth by how expensive their shoes are, how professional their appearance is, or how closely they fit the ideal customer image we've created in our minds. I fired the employee responsible, not because I wanted to make a point, but because I needed to protect the culture I've worked so hard to build. One where every person is treated with respect, no matter how they walk through the door." She hesitated before hitting post. But when she finally did, she closed the laptop, walked to her kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and prepared herself for whatever came next. She wasn't prepared for what did come next. By morning, the post had gone viral. It was being shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, X, Instagram, and Facebook. Dozens of internet users, entrepreneurs, business owners, industry professionals picked up on the story, praising Vanessa's leadership, courage, and immediate action. People weren't there for the drama. They were there for the message. Comments rolled in by the thousands. This is why representation matters. As a Black woman in finance, I've been this person too many times. The way she fired him with grace and then turned it into a teaching moment? Masterclass. Can we get this woman to train the customer service staff at every luxury business in the country? Local news stations reached out for interviews. A few national outlets picked it up, and podcasts started quoting her post. Vanessa Lewis, already respected in Atlanta's business community, was now being seen by the broader public as a symbol of strength through leadership. But despite the exposure, Vanessa kept her focus where it mattered most: her people. Within a week, she released an internal memo. We are implementing a new customer interaction training program focused on empathy, anti-bias awareness, and inclusive service values. She called it Customer First, Always. And it wasn't just for show. She brought in experts on bias and diversity training. She built modules and workshops, retrained senior staff alongside new hires, and made sure that every associate, manager, and executive went through the full program. More than that, Vanessa made storytelling a part of the culture. She invited customers to share their experiences, good and bad, and ensured employees heard them without defensiveness. The results? Immediate. Profound. Customers noticed the difference within weeks. Sales associates genuinely asked more questions, made more eye contact, and listened more closely to everyone. There was renewed energy on the floor. Word of mouth began to spread. People from all backgrounds, longtime residents, newcomers, professionals, and artists, started walking into Victory Motors and feeling something different. They didn't get treated like wallets. They got treated like people. Customer engagement scores rose. Online reviews started highlighting not just the inventory or showroom, but the warmth of the staff. And for the first time in company history, Vanessa received thank you letters that talked about how seen someone felt during their test drive. And the impact didn't stop there. Other dealerships across Georgia began reaching out to Victory Motors, asking if they could license the training Vanessa had developed. She agreed on one condition: that the business is committed to changing their culture, not just their scripts. Her training program was soon implemented at multiple locations across the state. It became bigger than cars. It became a movement. Back at Victory Motors, employees often talked about that day as the moment everything changed. Not just because of what happened to Mark, but because of what Vanessa did next. She didn't just remove the problem. She created the solution. She didn't post for clicks. She posted for change. And every customer who walked through the dealership doors after that day, whether they wore designer suits or worn-out jeans, drove a Bentley or caught a rideshare, felt that change. Vanessa didn't need validation. She had already succeeded. But what she gained that day, above everything else, was peace in knowing that the business she had built finally matched the values she had held from the very beginning. Because she understood something that too many forget. Great customer service starts with recognizing the humanity in everyone. And respecting people shouldn't require a business suit or a bank statement. It should come standard. Just like the keys to a brand new car. This story isn't just about a rude manager and a shocking reveal. It's about power, dignity, and how perception can often blind us from the truth. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that inspire and teach us the true meaning of respect.